Robin here with LBJ Athletic Training. Today we're going to talk about the different types of fractures you need to know about to get checked off for fractures. So first of all, I drew out some of the different fracture types here. Right here you have just a normal bone. Alright, no fracture going on. And then here you have a transverse fracture, where you have just a straight break right here that goes perpendicular with the long axis of the bone. Here you have an oblique fracture, which takes place at an angle to the bone. Right here you have a spiral fracture. It's kind of hard to see, but it's actually going to wrap around the bone here. Then here you have a comminuted fracture. That is where the bone breaks up into all these little tiny pieces. It looks really bad, but it actually isn't that hard to heal, because none of these little pieces are displaced. They're all in the same place, so that'll heal up pretty quickly. And here you have a segmental fracture, basically just two transverse fractures. And then right here we have a green stick fracture, which is more common in younger kids when the bones are still very pliable. So if you've ever taken a piece of a tree that's still growing, otherwise called a green stick, and you try and break it, you'll notice they're very hard to break. They'll just bend before they'll break. So this is what will happen if you try and bend a still growing, very pliable bone. Another thing that will happen if you try and bend a very pliable bone is you'll get a torus fracture, where the bone just kind of bends but doesn't break. Then here we have an impacted fracture. That'll happen most of the times from a jump. And if this was a femur, that's what would happen to it if you landed on it wrong. And then lastly, here you have an avulsion fracture. So as you can see, a little piece has been pulled off right here. And that's actually also pretty easy to fix as long as there's no ligament damage. And usually that'll get pulled off by a ligament that's attached to it. What a doctor can do is just screw it back onto the main part of the bone, and it'll heal up pretty quickly. So the other stuff you're going to need to know is about epiphyseal injuries. So these are also known as growth plate injuries. So the epiphysis is at the end of long bones, like your femur and your humerus, and it shows up as a dark line on an x-ray. So there's a couple of different types of epiphyseal injuries. You don't need to know those. All you really need to know is that growth plate is going to show up in adolescence. And if you get a fracture on that epiphysis, your growth plate may prematurely close. And that's not good, because then you could end up with two arms or two legs that are of an unequal length. And then the last thing you should know is about the Colles fracture. And we talk about this one because it's really, really common if you fall on your outstretched hand. So, fall on an outstretched hand, that is an acronym, spells out FOOSH. Falling on an outstretched hand. And that results in a Colles fracture, also known as a silver fork deformity. So that's super common, and you should know what it is. So that's all for fractures. See you next time.